Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Tuesday, November 19th, 2024. I am John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine, still reeling in the glow from Sunday night's roast of Natan Sharansky. The room was electric. We all had a wonderful time with everybody who came. Those of you who stayed sleeping in your beds shall think themselves accursed that they were not with us on that day and hour, and you will have a chance to do that next year when we give you information about the roast, which is our leading fundraiser of the year. And you're going to hear from me later after Thanksgiving about ways in which you can help contribute to keep the podcast going and Commentary as an institution healthy and thriving. We are a nonprofit 501c3, and we depend on the eleemosynary generosity of our readers, our listeners, and people who believe in the mission that we are pursuing to keep the lights on, to keep publishing, and to keep podcasting. But that will come later. Today, we're just going to do what we do every day. And by we, I mean executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Media commentary columnist at American Enterprise Institute, senior fellow Christine Rosen. Hi, Christine.
Hi, John.
Christine's colleague at AEI, our Washington commentary columnist, Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
And our senior editor, Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
There is a lead story in the New York Times this morning that says that by Maggie Haberman and Jonathan Swan, who are both extraordinarily well-sourced, and by well-sourced, I mean that when you see a Maggie Haberman byline on something, chances are that Trump himself might personally be involved, which you know because he then always says things like, I don't know her, I never met her, I don't know who she is, I don't know where she gets these things, which probably means that he is the direct source. But according to this story, he has acknowledged that there is a less than even chance that Matt Gaetz is going to be confirmed as Attorney General, but he figures he's going ahead with it. He's making phone calls because even if he doesn't get Gaetz through, the fact that people will have to reject Gaetz will make it easier. It opens the Overton window, as we say, and will make it easier for his other controversial nominees to get through, since the Senate Republicans presumably will not want to just simply hand him defeat after defeat. This was a theory that was promulgated in the immediate aftermath of the day of crazy appointments, the Gabbard Gaetz RFK day, or whatever it was, 36 hours, that he was flooding the zone. And
are we calling this Gaetz Gate, by the way? That reminds me.
It's just not. It's not good. It's not. It's too. There's not. Doesn't rhyme. I don't know. It's not. It's Gaetz Gate is not good because there's no gate. It's basically he picked a child molester to be his attorney general, and that's probably not going to happen. Or not a child molester, an ephebophile. Let's say we now have multiple witnesses who have come forth to say that not only did they see him having sexual relations with underage girls, but that we have senators saying that he bragged about taking Viagra, mixing it with energy drinks.
They're claiming he also paid them for this.
Oh, that's right. That's the other right. That's the new right. Yeah. That's the new wrinkle. Is that there is charges of essentially prostitution with underage girls. It's not good. And so to be the lead chief law enforcement officer.
Well, there are no charges. There's accusations.
There's accusations. I'm sorry. I should only say that there are accusations.
Just to get the chronology straight, this was, of course, part of an investigation into a former friend and ally of his in Florida. That former friend and ally then made charges against Gaetz about this type of behavior, including sex trafficking, essentially, of a girl who was underage. And the FBI looked into it and did not pursue any charges against Gaetz. That's Merrick Garland's Justice Department that did not file any charges. So what the sword of Damocles that is hanging over the Gaetz nomination is this House Ethics report that the House Ethics Committee will be meeting over tomorrow, November 20th. And we're not sure whether they'll release it. However, the sentiment in Washington is, even if the House Ethics Committee decides not to release the report because Matt Gaetz resigned from Congress on the day Trump nominated him to be the Attorney General, the report will leak. And so these details and these accusations are very damaging. No one wants them. No one wants to be tarred with this stuff. In addition, Gaetz has a problem, which is that no one really likes him. I mean, this is the big problem with some of these MAGA nominees is they are anti-system figures. They take blowtorches to the institutions, but when you do that, you make a lot of enemies, right? You people just don't like you very much, and so when you have to rely on them for votes, you're going to have to present a new face. And so, just to finish, this is why I think what Gaetz is up to is very interesting, because he's a guy who's famous for playing the outside game. He's always in the media. He's always on MAGA media. He's front and center. But since he's been nominated, you actually haven't heard much about him. He's now trying to play an inside game. And I think that's where they're trying to gauge the support and whether he has any chance of making it to January. And it's not looking good. I mean, from what we can tell right now.
The story today is
women have also retained counsel, and their lawyer is going to go make the media rounds as well. So even if the report doesn't leak, a lot of the allegations will be out there in the public, among the chattering classes, as it were. And his inside game, as Matt says, is not great. I mean, this is the thing. He's going around and making calls and doing all the things that he's supposed to do. But I don't think from what we know, the reports from the Senate are, while some of the senators are worried that if they do have to have a hearing for this guy, he'll turn it into a spectacle that redounds to his effect while making them vulnerable to the sort of more MAGA elements in their constituencies. But I'm not buying that that's actually an effective strategy for him.
I gotta sort of disagree with the two of you a little bit, which is to say that the story today is the stake in the heart of the Gaetz nomination. Trump has let it be known to the New York Times that he thinks Gaetz is not going to be confirmed.
Here's hoping. Yeah.
So he's not going to be confirmed. That means that Trump is saying, one more thing. And Matt, I'm going to ask you to step down. Now, by the way, there is an even more interesting wrinkle that people haven't quite taken the measure of. He has resigned from this Congress, right? Each Congress is its own specific, I don't know which it is, the 118th or the 119th Congress, something like that.
I think it may actually be the 120th. Yeah.
Is it the 120th? He was elected to serve in the 121st Congress on November 5th. He has resigned from Congress. He has resigned from this Congress. If between now and the swearing in of the new members of Congress, which I guess happens January 3rd or January 4th, something like that, he says, I'm not going to go up for nomination, go right back into the House.
I'm sorry, it's the 118th.
So the coming Congress is the 119th.
Right.
He is an elected, he is congressman elect for his district in the 119th Congress. So he can just slide right back in. He just quit for the last 2 months. So this is an even more interesting thing where it's like, oh, you think you got rid of me? You didn't get rid of me at all.
Which is also what guarantees that the report will come out. Like the threat, the Gaetz threat that he's not actually going anywhere, absolutely guarantees, because they're not going to let him resign for a few days to get out of the ethics report and then come back and, say, well, you picked the right week to do it. So the battles will go on also.
But what Mike Johnson is doing, by the way, is what now this is where I agree with Matt. We're talking about allegations. He was never charged. Of course, there can be many reasons why someone is not charged, like that the witnesses that would be called, whoever was investigating Gaetz at the FBI says they're bad witnesses or they're unreal, or they'll be eaten up on the stand and prosecutorial discretion says.
Or the subject is an elderly man with a poor memory.
Right. Thank you. Yes. There are many reasons why you don't actually bring charges, and a lot of them can have to do with whether or not the witnesses that you need on the stand will come across as credible to a jury. If you determine that is not the case, then you might not want to proceed at all.
But remember, the guy behind all of this is in jail right now. So yes. Clearly, I think
but
Greenberg
again, often
is his
a
name.
Bad witness, right? That's the worst kind of witness.
Right.
Is maybe he's cutting a deal to get favorable treatment in prison, whatever it does. My point is that there can be many reasons why what Mike Johnson is doing by saying we are not going to release this report. I don't want to give it to the Senate. It's a Pandora's box. Once you start releasing the reports of an ethics committee on an investigation in which someone is not going to be charged or is left at whatever, those investigations are now forever going to be subject to release. And we want there to be some kind of House Ethics Committee process. It's a bad process. It often is there to exonerate people. It's like the bad internal affairs investigations at corrupt police departments. Like, they have no interest in going at each other. This entire investigation of the House Ethics Committee appears to be part of this feud that Gaetz was involved with Kevin McCarthy, and this is the revenge of Kevin McCarthy, all of that. And Mike Johnson's like, no, we're not going to release this report. He's not a member of Congress anymore. Don't put pressure on us to start opening up a process of internal investigation, or we're never going to have an internal investigation ever again. Like, I can never, in good conscience, open investigations into ethics violations because I have no idea whether or not the person who is the subject of the investigation won't have dirty dimes dropped on him when he didn't do anything wrong.
Gaetz is subjected as a nominee for this position to an FBI background check, which even that basic vetting measure he might not pass because of his the accusation of past drug use and whatnot.
Excuse me, that's unclear. Excuse me. Because the Trump transition may not actually use the FBI for some of its background checks.
Right.
The mistrust is so deep.
Right.
Well, first you'll make Kash Patel the FBI director, then you'll put Gaetz through the background check.
He's not even the worst background check. Tulsi Gabbard is the worst background check and the hardest background check. I mean, because there are all these other nominations. Of course, you have a background check on RFK Jr. also, but a lot of his peccadillos are entirely public. So, it's not. I don't know what they'll come up with that isn't already.
The FBI is going to contact Olivia Nuzzi. I mean, that's all
Lizzie
out in the open.
Is already a wholesome entry in the RFK ledger of misbehavior dating back 50 years.
I think this is why it's important to kind of take a step back from any of the individual nominations, such as the Gaetz nomination, and just look at the transition as a whole, because it is a pretty remarkable thing to behold. I mean, the first characteristic of it is the speed. These names just kind of come out of nowhere via an announcement by President-elect Trump. And I was trying to think, it's almost like one of those dystopian game shows, like, or the Hunger Games or Squid Game. Everyone looks up in the sky and a name appears, and it's, oh, okay. And the vast majority of these names are very impressive. I mean, you think about this team that Trump is assembling for energy with Doug Burgum and Chris Wright of Liberty Energy. That's great. That's going to sail through. Rubio, Stefanik, it's going to sail through. Even, the Duffy nomination for transportation, again, kind of fits Trump's criteria: loyalist, telegenic, good communicator. I don't see any major...
So this is Sean Duffy, who was a congressman for 8 years,
and now
Wisconsin,
a Fox host,
district attorney, a Fox host. His wife, Rachel, also a Fox host. They have 9 kids. He resigned from the House because their youngest daughter, who was born when Rachel Campos Duffy was 48, has Down syndrome, and he went to Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan told me this himself and said, I got to go make money because we're going to need to make sure, and that they don't, we're going to need to make sure that our youngest is cared for and, can get the kind of treatment and support that she needs. So he left the Congress for that reason. And in the intervening 5 years, Rachel has kind of exploded as a star on Fox, and I assume they therefore now have the financial independence that will allow him to be the Secretary of Treasury. He's very well liked. He is a very likable person. He has an absolutely standard, perfect resume.
Right. So he's not going to have any problem to get transportation, right?
He'll be
so
98-0.
It's really
if anybody is 98.
The 4 horsemen of the Maga apocalypse, right? That everyone's concentrating on: Hegseth, Gabbard, Gaetz, and RFK Jr. And the question is, is will they all go down, or will one of them or two of them take the brunt of the criticism, thus allowing the other two or three to get in? And so it's not just we're talking about Matt Gaetz, and he's the most famous, I think, and the biggest lightning rod of the four, especially in Washington, right? But there's Hegseth is facing now his own set of allegations about sexual behavior, sexual crime. And this is a big problem, too, that no one seems to be really talking about, because we're all talking about Matt Gaetz. Meanwhile, you just said Gabbard. Gabbard's positions on foreign policy are at odds with many Trump policies, as the Wall Street Journal points out in a very good editorial this morning. And then, of course, you have RFK Jr., who's hanging out there and ready to go after the Fritos. But that image that appeared over the weekend of Trump and Elon Musk and Don Jr. and RFK on Trump Force One, and they're forcing RFK Jr. to hold the Big Mac. We don't know whether he ate the Big Mac, but it just shows you that people are changed by Trump. People are changed by Trump. You don't change Trump. He changes you.
Trump says they made him take a couple bites.
There you go. Right. So maybe he'll be very different in office, RFK Jr., than what we've heard from him over the past 30 some years of his public advocacy and conspiracy theorizing.
I think it's worth noting, as I hear Matt recall the various problems with three of the four horsemen, Gaetz, RFK, and Hegseth. They are linked by this sort of cloud of sleaze, which gives a sort of taint to the entire process and the entire news cycle here. In all these cases, we're talking about extramarital things. We're talking about prostitution. We're talking about underage girls. We're talking about drugs. This is some image collectively here that is being asserted that is not good.
Well, what's funny is that you can immediately say, okay, Trump was subjected to charges about his personal behavior. He was found liable for sexual assault in a New York courtroom involving the case with E. Jean Carroll. He clearly thinks that such things are not disqualifying, or that they may be unjust, or you're being pursued illegitimately by the deep state or something like that. But that was actually submitted to the voters of the United States, who had a choice to make in November about whether or not the totality of things that we know about Trump and the obvious things that did happen, right? The Stormy Daniels relationship and the payoff that really did happen.
Locker room talk,
all of that, and
right.
and he
and
was
RFK
elected.
was
Right.
side by side with him through the last part of the election too. So when you were seeing Trump, you were often seeing RFK. That
Right.
was part of the package.
But I'm saying the voters said, we've heard it, we're electing him anyway. But none of these guys are elected. They're just selected by Trump. And it is the Senate, in a weird way, that elects them. Like, the advise and consent process is the check on the president's ability to simply put whoever he wants in the cabinet departments. And what may be true for Trump, and maybe he's experimenting with these choices, they're true for Trump because they've been subjected, or they have gone through a public plebiscite where the idea was he is not disqualified from the presidency for his personal behavior, because the voters decided that he was not disqualified for his behavior. And he may say this behavior should not be disqualifying for other people, but nobody else has to say that. They don't have this fact of 77, 78 million votes, whatever it is that he's going to end up with in the end. And that's why I think this story is so significant, the Swan Haberman story, which is that Trump is saying, yeah, you can have Gaetz.
Well,
I don't think he's going to be confirmed. It's probably not going to be confirmed. So go ahead, eat at him. We'll see where this goes.
But this,
Yeah, go
This
ahead.
is the I mean, this is the thing. I think Gaetz and Gabbard are the most vulnerable, honestly. But not just because of the personal history, because the intense dislike and the fact that Gabbard, let's recall, has only been a Trump supporter, and I don't even know if she's changed her party registration. She's a Democrat up until 2022,
She
and
did leave the Democratic Party
left the
this
party,
year.
right?
Yeah.
So but that was just pretty recently. The
Right.
main thing is, I think any senator who's worried about primary challengers, MAGA challengers, and if they're up for in the next election cycle, can say, "Oh no, we want to clean up the deep state. We want to clean up all these various rotting institutions." But these people are a distraction. Their personal behavior causes a distraction. They will not be able to do that job. They are. It's a qualification issue, I think, with Matt Gaetz. And with Gabbard, just simply her foreign adventurism means that she's not necessarily going to be trusted by the Five Eyes, with whom we're all supposed to be sharing information. So it strikes me that those two going down will not cause much harm to the senators who might have to have any sort of public flagellation of them during hearings.
Well, I mean, one big difference with Gaetz, though, is that there's a self-preservation angle to it. They asked a congressman the other day, "You think Gaetz is qualified?" And he said, "Oh, hell no." Oh, and now you're going to quote me on that, and now I'm going to be investigated.
Yeah.
That I thought was actually kind of the point, that the thought that's going through a lot of people's heads, which is the senators don't want to give Matt Gaetz the ability to investigate everybody, because when you say we're going to drain the swamp, that means Republicans too, and as Trump sees it, right, the establishment. And why would you? Alfie Solomon says in Peaky Blinders, you never give power to the big man. Right? You never take the guy who's going to have the control and knowingly give him more power over you. You never give power to the big. So I think for Gaetz, it's not even the scandalous stuff. I think it's just pure self-preservation. I think you'd have to be crazy if you were in Congress and part of the established Republican Party or Democratic Party to give this man that power. And that, in the end, I think is the thing that makes him unconfirmable, because you'd have to be crazy to confirm him. You won't get rewarded for it. You'll get investigated for it.
I just think that Trump is signaling that he is not going to expend political capital on Gaetz, and that could extend. Okay.
Well, I mean, you're right. The takeaway from that story in the New York Times is he's saying, "Yeah, I don't know if I can get 50 senators to support him." And there's other reporting elsewhere testing the kind of the sense of the conference, the Republican conference, where the Wall Street Journal says they don't think there's more than 30 votes for Gaetz right now. At the same time, in that New York Times story, we know that Trump is calling senators and saying, "Hey, this is my guy," and we also know that Vance, who is helping Gaetz make some contact with senators and trying to introduce him. Two things about that. First is Vance's role in the transition is fascinating to me, because he is not as public facing as the president-elect and also the first buddy, Elon Musk, right? I mean, the way that Musk has asserted himself in this transition is just one more aspect of the completely new reality we live in, where Elon Musk is the second most powerful person in the world, essentially. And so, where's Vance? I think that's fast. I think he's working behind the scenes, and I'd love to read some reporting about what he's up to. The second thing is, I do believe that of all the picks so far, and of the four horsemen, the one that's most important to MAGA right now is Gaetz, because the MAGA is dead set on tearing the Department of Justice apart, right? And they see Matt Gaetz as a Trump-like blunt force instrument to do that job. So while I agree that the nomination is in jeopardy, I still don't think it's completely done, as you're suggesting.
But there are people who are not MAGA who believe essentially in some version of what Gaetz wants to do. I mean, I do not believe that I would not want to lose him as a contributor, but our Eli Lake has written 7 or 8 pieces.
Eli would be fantastic as the AG.
Eli Lake, who is not a,
he would get confirmed.
Is the idea that the Justice Department and the FBI require fundamental reforms based on their conduct over the last 10 or 15 years is something that has appeared in the pages of the anti-MAGA publication Commentary since 2017. I don't think this is an outre opinion that requires you to appoint a potential ephebophile person who crumbles up his Viagra into his energy drink in order to achieve this aim. Mike Lee, as I mentioned yesterday, could achieve this aim. The senator from Utah.
Well, it's interesting, that based Mike Lee has not been brought up, and it's not clear whether he interviewed for the position. And I think that maybe some of the senators are probably telling Trump, "Hey, there are other people we could have no problem."
That's why he's making the calls, and on the calls, we don't know that he's calling him and saying, "You better do this, or I'm going to make sure you're primary." No. He could be like, "What do you think of Gaetz?" And they're like, "I don't like it." And he's like, "That's interesting."
That's usually how these calls work.
Or he's saying, I think he might be saying, who would you give me that would allow me to save face as a reformer to some extent of this Justice Department, because it's really important to my base that I do this. If we pull Gaetz, can you be somebody who's 75% the way there, 50% the way there? What do we have here?
There are also power struggles within Trump world right now, not just with Elon and Vance, but Don Jr., whose judgment seems really not great on a lot of potential nominees, and he's a Gaetz supporter. So and we're hearing these stories about who's leaking to whom, and did Elon pick a fight with someone over here? And so there's clearly, as with every transition in power, and then there's the Susie Wiles types. They're the professionals who kind of want to get things moving. That all has to settle as well. And because Trump is so mercurial, I can well imagine him sort of sitting back and playing them all off each other in a way that probably is quite entertaining for him, but rather disastrous for the process if he's going to change his mind at the last minute, as it sounds like he might have done even with the Gaetz pick. Like somebody put Gaetz in front of him the day before he's about to announce someone else. He's like, okay, let's go with this guy.
Abe, let's just take 2 minutes to talk about Elon Musk for a minute, because he is the most interesting person on the planet Earth as far as I'm concerned. He was somebody,
and on Mars.
I think people are going to, and on Mars. I think he's somebody people are going to be writing about the way they wrote about some combination of Thomas Edison and Henry Ford and William Randolph Hearst. I don't know who. Like, there's never been a figure quite like this. I don't think Trump can have him around the way he has him around much longer. First of all, I think Trump is like either thrilled but he is starting to get the quality of the dinner guest who is staying too long, and that the host is now starting to take off the tie and take off the jacket, and they're starting to take the glasses into the kitchen. This to talk about how he's trying to involve himself in the choice of the Treasury Secretary, and pushing Howard Lutnick as the Treasury Secretary, whom Trump clearly does not want to be the Treasury Secretary. I just get this feeling that Musk's heady intoxication about his closeness to to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue is going to start having repellent effects on Trump.
Well, I think, look, the good qualities about Musk, I think, are important to Trump and are helpful to Trump and are helpful to his vision, and meaning his interest in cutting waste and fraud and upping efficiency, and his passion for American ingenuity and industry, all that. The problem is, I think you're right, John. The problem is that there cannot be another larger-than-life, reckless figure side by side with Trump. He's that guy. He needs the straight men or the straight women or some version of. Although Steve Bannon,
that's why he has Mike Johnson.
Right. That's right.
That's right. And even though he's not his choice, John Thune will play that role as well.
Speaker Johnson has become a meme. It's wonderful.
Steve Bannon was a very different figure from Elon Musk, but he was going around talking about how he's a Leninist and how this is great and there's going to be a revolution. And how long was it before Trump was calling him Sloppy Steve?
6 months.
Yeah. So I think there's something to that.
Bannon's back by the way. And
before it's crazy Elon.
Yeah, I don't know. I think there's something different happening here with this relationship, and I part of me wonders whether Elon Musk will be living in the White House more often than Melania Trump. And
well, that's easy because you'll be living in the White House more than Melania Trump.
I never set foot in it. So
Stick a fork in Melania. She's done with.
No. She's back. She's got the book. She's going to be there more often, I'm sure. In any case, I don't see any signs that the Trump-Musk bromance is ending anytime soon. In fact, today, as we speak, November 19th, Trump will be traveling to Texas with Musk to watch a SpaceX launch. So
this is my concern about the future of humanity. If I can just get like wild,
yeah, let's go cut to the chase. Yeah,
we don't need another White House aide pushing his favorite Treasury Secretary. We need Elon Musk supervising this company that figures out how to grab a rocket and bring it back to the gantry and then shoot it up again. That's why.
And this is why I think
it's less eating frozen food up there.
No, it's less. I think that it's less that Trump becoming disillusioned with Elon, and it may end up being Elon becoming slightly bored with Washington, D.C.
Right.
And that might be the way in which he kind of removes himself. But he is now at the intersection of so many conduits of power, whether it is the technological power, whether it's the financial power, whether it's the media power, because of the role that X is now playing in the national discourse, and in addition, political power. It's just incredible to behold. And like I say, I'm not seeing Trump becoming disillusioned by it at this point. It's a different situation than Bannon. I mean, remember too, Bannon in the White House, very different situation in 2017 than in 2025, when there were a lot of people in that White House, which has been described as the team of vipers who were out to get Bannon, and eventually they succeeded halfway through the first year. I don't think there you have the same ability to push Elon Musk out because of Elon Musk's larger than life stature.
Right. Well, Bannon was a shyster.
Bannon was more. He had greater ambitions than Elon Musk does to control what goes on. Musk definitely has, the Treasury Secretary he wants and this and that, but Musk bounces from idea to idea and from project to project, and he's not a guy he's not coming to the White House now, Elon Musk, with a full lifelong ideological focus on how to blow everything up and who to put where and all that. Bannon really wanted to be a kind of puppet master. And that really grated on Trump to the extent that Bannon started taking credit for things.
Right, but it wasn't just that. Bannon is not the real deal. Bannon was a fake deal. He was not a big cheese in Hollywood. He's somebody who had a sliver of the syndication rights to Seinfeld. He was not a big cheese at Goldman Sachs. He was not a big cheese anywhere. He took over Breitbart. He conned a bunch of rich people like Rebecca Mercer into thinking that he was a towering genius. He's a fraud. He's a scam. He's a shyster. Now he's where he should be, which is that he is making a daily podcast that speaks to the people who think that his 3 shirts are an amazing innovation in fashion. And Trump, I think, it's not just that Trump was like, oh yeah, you're going to say you're President Bannon on the cover of Newsweek, you're out. Trump may have, after a while said, who is this guy? What is this, a joke? Like, he knows who's real and who's not real. And he didn't know enough about Washington or about the whole world of politics to know at that point that Bannon wasn't real. Bannon was a shadow, Plato's cave shadow. And Elon Musk is as real as it gets. He is the most important industrialist of our time, bar none. And as I say, even Trump may think, what would be really great if you could go fix Boeing, go figure out how to make planes again, because go to help the Pentagon figure out how to make a really good, cheap fighter jet. I'm not kidding. Like, there's so much more he can do for America than give advice on who the deputy assistant secretary for energy should be.
But
It's a misuse of his talents.
So too is his functioning as a second mouthpiece for Trump. That's the other problem here. You know, he's on X day and night making pronouncements, quasi on behalf of the incoming administration, and you know that you have to speak with one voice.
A lot of weird stuff is going on, and some of it, I think, we can attribute to the change in administration. Meaning, Iran has yet to strike back against Israel. It's sort of like one of those things. It's like, oh, it's coming. The punch is coming. It's coming. It's coming. And it doesn't seem to be coming. It appears that the Ayatollah Khamenei may be in a coma, the head of the malocracy. So they may be having a leadership crisis that is either stalled this or is creating the conditions under which they don't know what to do or where to go. Hezbollah is firing rockets with impunity. Just actually a rocket that was intercepted over the neighborhood of Ramat Gan. The debris smashed down, killed 5 people yesterday in Ramat Gan. And we now learn that in one of the great Jewish traditions, that is Talmudic logic that allows you to see your way through arguments to a deeper argument, that in the strike that Israel launched against Iran, when was that now? 3 weeks ago, when we were told that Israel had been instructed by Biden and not to hit the oil or nuclear sites, that they did not hit the known oil or nuclear sites. But guess what? Turns out there's a nuclear site that nobody knew about that is not Natanz or Fordo, the 2 sites that we have been talking about now for 20 years. But there was a third undeclared nuclear site, and Israel wiped it out, and it therefore did not come under the category of the Biden, you can't hit the nuclear sites, because how do we know it's a nuclear site? The IAEA doesn't know it as a nuclear site, and we don't know it as a nuclear site. So damage has already been done. Israel has already not only taken out.
Tosfos says it's not a nuclear site. Rashi says it's not a nuclear site.
Exactly. Or it's a nuclear. What is nuclear? What, and how can we say that which is nuclear based on the term site? So it turns out that they have done damage to the Iranian nuclear program. They have taken out the entirety of Iran's air defenses. And Bibi Netanyahu last night said he expects that there will be a release of many hostages in the very near future. So things are bubbling and happening, and there's also political crises involving Netanyahu and his chief of staff. And can I just talk about that for 2 seconds now that I'm in this weird monologuing thing? There's a big story that came out in the summer. And the story was that documents from Hamas revealed that Hamas never had any intention of negotiating over the fate of the hostages, that they were going to use that this was their whip hand. Saying that they would negotiate would unnerve Israel, would put Israel on its back foot, but they wouldn't do it, all of that. And these documents were leaked to, first they were apparently, an attempt was made to leak them to the Israeli press, but the Israeli press functions under military censorship, and the editors at these places said we can't publish them because the military censors will not allow us to publish leaked information like this. So they were taken to Bild, which is a German publication, and to the Jewish Chronicle of London. Jewish Chronicle of London published them, and then there was some kind of bizarre outcry about who wrote it and who wrote the article, and where did he get the information, and what were these documents, and they retracted them. They apologized for publishing them. And now in Israel, somebody is in solitary confinement and somebody else in the prime minister's office is under investigation for leaking these documents. Meaning,
suicide watch, by the way, not just
it's on suicide watch. Meaning, they're true, they're not fake. And the argument that is being made is that they've been released, or they were released as a PR measure to strengthen Bibi's hand in the argument inside Israel that he needed to stand firm against Hamas and not fall for propaganda about releasing the hostages that Hamas would never live up to. So let's just follow the logic here. Bibi Netanyahu is accused of being part either the unwitting subject or the somehow the Machiavellian mind behind releasing documents that say Hamas will never negotiate properly over the hostages. And this is bad because it meant that he would have the upper hand in an argument inside Israel about whether or not they should make concessions to Hamas to get the hostages out. What am I missing? Where the crazy pills have been taken. So Bibi is right. Hamas said we'll never negotiate over the hostages. He had to go abroad, or whoever his people had to go abroad to get the story out, because it could not be retailed in Israel because of military censorship. And he is being attacked in Israel and by some in the judiciary in Israel for having played no fair by releasing these documents and thereby winning the argument. That he's won because the argument is irrefutable. Hamas says it's not going to go negotiate. Now the Israeli people know documents say Hamas is not going to negotiate, and it's like, no fair. We Kaplan protesters, we people who are out in yelling and screaming about Bibi, we want to keep yelling and screaming about how Bibi is at fault, and now he's made our argument harder. Well, that's my rant. Do we have anybody want to?
Look, Seth has a comment.
Part of this is you could make from the as you said, the Kaplan protester side, you can make the argument that we made about the report on Gaetz, which is there's a process, and if the process was violated at the behest of the prime minister, then that is a scandal in itself. That's one thing you could say. But the larger problem is that they've been trying to connect this to Bibi in ways that aren't working. So, for example, one of the arguments that the New York Times made, one of the reporters made, was Bibi, they released this, they leaked this to Bild. Bild said somebody either there or at the Jewish Chronicle had suggested that this was found on Yahya Sinwar's computer, but it wasn't actually from Yahya Sinwar, and it wasn't immediately recent. Now, I wrote about this when it happened for commentary on the blog, and I mentioned the entire point of my piece was it doesn't really matter if this document is what people said it was, because the document itself described the reality as we all knew it. The document said Hamas was going to keep pulling the football away like Lucy on the negotiations, that Sinwar was going to play psychologically with the hostages' families and with the Israeli public, that he was going to try to make trouble in Israel, pit people against each other, but ultimately he wasn't actually going to agree to a hostage deal, all these things. And I said, this is what we're seeing with our own eyes. So the larger point here is that these documents described reality. So what that they were from June instead of August when they were reported? The point was we all knew this is what had been going on from the beginning. So on some level, it's very hard to battle against Bibi here because he's on the side of reality as it has been proved to be. And it's very hard to argue against what we know we're seeing with our own eyes. So you have to try to get him on like, did they break a rule on the leak? It has to be a sort of get him on tax avoidance sort of thing, because the larger argument is over.
It's part of a larger pattern of the way Bibi is always attacked. And I think it's a very unsuccessful strategy on the part of his detractors. When he does something, they say he's failing, he's doing a terrible job, this is awful, he should have done X, but he did Y, and now Israelis are very angry at him, and his hold is tenuous. Then when he does something that's clearly a win, they say, oh, he succeeded, but this is only to stay in power and avoid jail time.
Right.
Can I follow up on that, because I think it's
Yeah.
an excellent point, Abe, and I've just been thinking for the past few days about how similar Trump and Netanyahu are, in the sense that the same institutions and figures who are constantly attacking Netanyahu have American equivalents who are constantly attacking Trump. And I had this moment of, I would say not revelation, but just kind of a recognition of epistemological limits when I realized that the voices that I hear talking about Israeli politics are the equivalent of the Peter Bakers and Susan Glassers in the United States. And so I don't believe half the things that Peter Baker and Susan Glasser say. So you have to approach Israeli politics, I think, and the media in Israel and the institutions in Israel, which are aligned against Netanyahu and his coalition, with the same amount of skepticism and incredulity.
Well, that's the interesting thing, is that the Israeli state is not deep. And so the deep state is the deep state, as we've come to learn. It is, the idea in the United States, which a lot of us have problems with, because the United States government is so large and is so complex, and there are so many levels, and there are so many states and localities, and the idea that there's some kind of invisible guiding hand of a conspiracy that is doing this. It's real in Israel. It's right there on the surface. You have the judiciary.
The deep state is your equivalent of defense secretary in Israel.
Yeah, or no, but like the attorney general in Israel has the power to tell to tell the prime minister he can hire this guy but not hire that guy, without any real legislation that gives him that authority, but based on rulings by the Supreme Court that itself appoints itself. So that's what this judicial reform stuff is about.
Overturns reforms to its rules.
Right. And the thing is, right,
a reform, and the Supreme Court knocks down the reform to the Supreme Court's power to knock down reforms.
Yeah, and by the way, so I don't want to now we're sort of devolving into a conversation about the judicial reform process, but Israel doesn't have a written constitution. Therefore, it doesn't have checks and balances, and all democracies, all representative, need checks and balances. And so checks and balances are sort of created ad hoc. And that's not a good way to create checks and balances, because personalities then get involved as opposed to institutions. But I want to point out that the deep state, when Bibi fired Yoav Gallant, his defense minister, he said, Gallant said, there are three reasons that I was fired, one of which is I disagree. We have a disagreement on how much to stress the release of the hostages. Well, okay. I mean, so the argument seems to be the deep state wants to make, or the people who hate Bibi want to make, is that he likes the hostages being hostages, because the longer they're there, the longer he stays in power. This is a repulsive and repugnant and evil thing to say about it's just, imagine saying that about anybody, that he wants, a 3-year-old baby, a 2-year-old baby to be, like living in the tunnels to keep himself into power. Bibi may be a hard person to like, but you're accusing him of a deep crime for which he will live in Gehenna for eternity. But I wanted to point out Noga Tarnopolsky, who was a longtime Israeli journalist, put out a tweet the other day saying, very unusually, Shin Bet, which is the intelligence agency, released an image of Shin Bet head Ronen Bar, IDF Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi, Mossad Director David Barnea, and Major General Nitzan Alon, quote, meeting to promote efforts to bring back the hostages, unquote. Guess who's missing, she says, meaning Bibi's not there, right? That's who's missing, is Bibi. So therefore, obviously, he doesn't want to bring back the hostages because he's not at this meeting, or they're having a meeting behind his back, whatever, it doesn't matter then. Here is her explanation of the picture. Backstory to picture seems to be security chief's message to Netanyahu that Hamas What's left of it, with nothing left to lose, will not compromise on a formal end to the war in Gaza and full military withdrawal. No flexibility on Israel's side equals death for the 51 plus or minus surviving hostages. Okay, so define flexibility. What do you mean they need to show flexibility? Hamas is near death. Hamas is, from what we can tell, has somehow decentralized the hostages, in part to, make sure that they're not so easily found. What is it that Noga Tarnopolsky or these 5 guys sitting around a room discussing how to deal with the hostages, what is it exactly that they think? To whom should he be showing flexibility? Who's in charge of Hamas? Who's negotiating on behalf of Hamas?
No
This
one.
Is just a
And
way
I've noticed this in a lot of
hostage.
hostage.
Bibi's reputation.
I've noticed this in a lot of hostage discourse in the recent days. Hamas is it's just assumed that Hamas will agree to whatever proposal Israel puts forward, when history suggests no. And 2, who would agree at this? I mean, who is there literally to agree? We know that Hamas is still raiding the humanitarian convoys and stealing the aid and taking it underground. But the Qatar, we don't know whether the Hamas leadership in Qatar, where they're going. Are they going to Turkey now? Are they still in Qatar? The situation is much more complex than I think that the anti-Netanyahu faction in Israel is suggesting.
No, and they turned down a deal too. They did get together with the Egyptians a few weeks ago and try to work out a brief pause for 4 hostages or something like that, as a sign that Hamas, that there's someone in Hamas who can agree to a deal. Right? Prove to us that we should be negotiating with you, whoever you are, number 17 on the list, because we don't know who you are. Right. And Hamas walked away from that table.
May I make my recommendation so Christine can catch her flight?
I just want to say one thing, and then you do that. Okay,
all right.
Quickly, which is, this is just character assassination. Now, Bibi's been in power too long. You could make the case this is what happens when you're a prime minister over, 4 decades or something. It's not great to be a dominating figure like this. Everybody says, get out of my way. You're in my way. You're making it impossible for me to do anything. This is a way for the popular culture in Israel, led by this not so deep state, to say Bibi is responsible for the condition of the hostages. And you can hate Bibi, you can loathe. I don't care how you feel about Bibi. The hell with you. That is disgusting. It is a disgusting thing to do. He has been doing nothing for the last year or so but trying to save it. They figured out how to fight the war. He pushed the button on fighting Hezbollah. He's led the country into the raids on Iran. Everything that Israel likes that has turned around has happened under his leadership. They can't get the hostages out, or they're having incredible trouble. And you're going to blame a Jew for the hostage taking of the world's worst monstrous anti-Semitic force, and you're blaming the duly elected, legitimately elected prime minister of your country for that. Shame on you. Okay, go ahead, Matt.
Okay, I'll be very brief to respect Christine's time. I just want to briefly recommend a book that I have picked up. It turns out I had thought that it was a new release, but it is actually a few years old. The book is called Alien Archives, 18 Stories of Extraterrestrial Encounters by the science fiction author Robert Silverberg. Robert Silverberg is a science fiction legend. He's one of my favorite authors, period. And he wrote one of, I think, maybe among the top 5 best novels I've ever read. It's a very short novel called The Book of Skulls, which is not really science fiction. It's kind of like a horror novel, but it is incredible. So I recommend that, Book of Skulls, if you ever come across it. But Alien Archives is a collection of stories he's written about extraterrestrials and alien life over his many decades of science fiction writing. And I recommend it because I'm enjoying it very much. And we have a little sidebar here of science fiction recommendations and discussions. And so if you haven't read Robert Silverberg, he's the best.
I thought you were about to mention a nonfiction book that dovetails with the current obsession.
No, that's all
On
BS.
the right
I don't
about
believe
about
any
the
of
re-
that
about
stuff.
releasing the evidence.
No, that's all BS. I don't believe any of it.
They're
And
they're in the now they're in the ocean.
it's the same guy. The same
in the
guy
ocean.
testifies before Congress 5 times a
What's
year.
his name? Lombardo or something like
Elizondo,
that?
I think, or something.
Elizondo. Anyway, but it's like now we can't find them because they went into the ocean.
So
'Cause,
don't believe
the Earth
that.
is mostly
Just
ocean.
read Robert Silverberg and its great imaginative literature, and he's an excellent prose stylist, which is, for someone so prolific, is just incredible to behold.
And we got there. We're going to say goodbye, and it's going to be right on time for Christine to make her plane. So for the traveling Christine and Matt and Seth and Abe, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.